Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rising Stories podcast. I'm your host, Corrine Sandifer. On Rising Stories, we meet women who are changing their world. They are building businesses, writing books, and following their dreams. They share stories with us about their journey and their struggles along the way. We also talk about tips that have helped us live our lives with intention and purpose. We talk about best business advice, favorite apps, and our favorite things that we are loving right this minute. I hope this show will inspire you to live better, do better, and keep your dreams alive. Today on the show, I am talking with Tilly Dillehay, who has written a book called Seeing Green, Don't Let Envy Color Your Joy. She also blogs at While We Wait. On the show, Tilly and I talk about envy and what we can do about when it rears its ugly head in our lives. She tells us about how envy almost ruined some important relationships with her family members. Listen to hear her advice on how to remove envy from your thoughts and what you must do to keep it at bay. But before we begin, I would love it if you would join me on Instagram. That is where I share my productivity tips every Sunday. I do stories, Instagram stories, and I also share tips like how to categorize your to-do list and best practices for keeping your priorities together. And don't forget, the next week, I will be sharing my Friday favorites with you on the show. And now here is my conversation with Tilly. Hi, Tilly.
Hi. Hi, Corrine. How are you?
Good. Welcome to Rising Stories podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
You have written a book, and we have known each other for years. I think I've known you almost your whole life, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
It's really dating me, and I didn't want to admit it, but I'm going to because you are a dear friend, and your family is a dear friend of ours. And so I was surprised to hear that you have written a book, and it's very cool to see your name. And I haven't read it, but I've read a little bit of some information about it. So tell me more about this book. It's called Don't Let Envy Color Your Joy, Seeing Green.
That's right. It's called Seeing Green, and it's about envy. And I wrote the book because envy was actually just a really big problem for me in my own life. And it's so funny talking to you because you know our whole family. I don't think I've done an interview yet with someone who knows me from way back then and knows everything that I'm going to be talking about. But the opening illustration in my book is about my sisters. It's about Callie and Phoebe, and just the fact that when I was a young teenager, I really wanted to be a jazz singer. So I don't know if you remember, I recorded that CD of jazz cover tunes way back when. Yep. So I had these sort of ambitions to be like the female Michael Bublé, and I went off to college that next year after recording, and just really never pursued music with any kind of intentionality. Never really. Just got real busy and distracted. So a few years later, Callie and Phoebe had been working on all this kind of secret music writing that they were doing. They were learning how to play instruments, but they were doing everything sort of in their rooms where no one could hear them because they were shy. And
really, I had no idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there was the one day they decided, it's time to go and do a coffee shop gig and let people hear what we've been working on together. Mm-hmm. So I remember I have a vivid memory of that night of walking into that coffee shop and hearing, they strap on their ukulele and their guitar, and they open their mouths and start to sing. And none of us, I'd never heard any of it before. Wow. But it was just like, this, back then they were still young. It was still maybe not as developed as it got later on, but the beauty was there. Like the pure diamond potential was all there, and what they were doing was beautiful. So that night, I sat there and tears were just running down my face, and it was the beauty of the music, but it was also this stabbing feeling of pain that this glory had kind of risen up behind me, that wasn't mine. It was, it was envy that sort of struck for the first time that night. And as the years went by, it only got worse. I mean, as they continued to write and they formed their band and went on the road, and every time I had to sit and listen to them, it was supremely painful. And I began to sort of avoid, I couldn't avoid hearing it completely, but I would avoid talking about it. I didn't want to think about it too much. And there was distance that grew up between us, and we had been very close. All of my siblings, we've always been close. And for years we were basically estranged because of me and my envy, and not even ever having used that word or diagnosed what was going on. I just knew that I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to see that glory. So it was years past. I had sort of my dramatic conversion when I was in my early 20s, and we were all getting married within the same year. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I went to all these weddings. It was like boom, boom, boom. I went to all of them.
Right. It was like me, and then maybe 6 or 8 months later, Callie and Phoebe got married within a week of each other, one weekend and then the next weekend.
I do, yeah.
So the week that they were getting married, or really with all of our weddings, I realized we're standing up in each other's weddings. Something about standing up to be with them at their weddings. And
testifying kind of thing. Yeah.
That's right. Like, I remember real clearly, there was a night of toast making before one of the weddings, and my mom said something to me like, "Tilly, you should say something. You like to use words or whatever." And I realized I could not, because I had nothing to say. I did not know Callie well enough to even speak into her wedding day. And that was this sort of period of time. I remember it hitting me real hard that something was wrong, and I needed to figure out what it was. And the word envy really entered my awareness very soon after that, and I started to read. And it was soon after that I found this C.S. Lewis essay called The Weight of Glory, that is not about envy, but that gave me this language of glory to help understand why envy was so very painful and struck at the heart of my very identity, really, and my deepest desires. So
I never knew, that it kind of put a chasm between you and your sisters, and that you weren't in each other's lives as you should have been all along.
As we should have been,
As it should have been. Things like envy is that I believe that some people just have a bent for it, and other people don't. Other people could, kind of, I guess, not like alcoholism, because it is a disease, but more of like some people are more susceptible to feeling envious and it being a problem. And I know, we know from Romans 1 that Paul says that envy is, he lists these sins that are sort of the sign of fallen man. Like, this is what a lost society looks like, and envy is the first thing that he mentions in this list, which he winds up in all kinds of places with that list. But I think that, envy is natural. We saw it very soon after the fall with Cain and Abel. And it, there are all kinds of examples. But I definitely don't think that every person struggles with envy, because I've met people who said, you've described it for me. I understand what you're talking about, but I just don't think I experienced that. And I'm totally ready to believe that. I've met many, many people who can identify where it is in their lives, but it may not be this sort of dominating thing that it was for me and has been for me. So, it's a spectrum. I would say it's kind of a spectrum. That's a good way to put it, because I do think that most everyone, it has a place in probably everyone's lives, just not a stronghold. I'm sure that I think, sure wish that I could do that, or that I was here, or whatever. But it kind of it's just one of those like normal things that then there are others who it really does grab a hold of them, and it kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I lost time with my sisters that I can't ever, I can't get that time back. The Lord has restored the relationship, but those years of intimacy have been lost. And there have been other relationships that in my life that I also talk about in the book where, there was a break of intimacy. But I think it's very common for envy to crop up between you and people who are sort of your peers, those who are maybe even close to you in your life, because those are the people that you sort of measure yourself against. Mm-hmm. Your classmate or your coworker or your best friend, or that's where envy, at least the serious forms of envy, that's where they tend to crop up. But then you have like the flash in the pan, like what you're talking about, what you've experienced with just a passing thought, sort of, some person you may not even know very well, and you just think, oh, that looks good, I would like that, like to have that life.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So do you feel like you have overcome it, or is it something that you have to check in and control periodically?
I definitely. Oh yeah, I've got to check in and control. I was about to turn in the manuscript late last year, and here I am. I'm finished with the book. I've had these healed relationships. I'm supposed to be the expert in envy now, and I'm diagnosed. Basically, I've noticed around the time I'm turning in this manuscript that it has cropped up again, but in a new, with a new relationship, and it was a new area of envy. I talk about 7 different glories in the book that are common sort of things we would envy in other people. Things like physical beauty or talent, like my sister's talent, or intelligence, or personality. So in this case, I was envying a person's their ability to conduct their friendships and their personality.
Yeah.
But it was like, it was a good moment. It was a good moment for me to realize again, like, well, my heart is not just a totally different heart. I'm still going to have to watch out for this and keep confessing this as it comes up. So I don't think I realized until the last couple of years just how big of a deal the friendship thing is to grown women. That I guess I just sort of thought I was unique in that way, and I'm realizing almost every woman I know feels this way. So
every woman.
Just has this complicated set of feelings about their friendships. But that's the woman in us, I guess.
It is. We love connection and intimacy and camaraderie and solidarity.
Yeah. I think it's really important for us to start to see this envy. The heart of envy is just ungrateful for what God has already given us and done for us. And I think it's also important that we don't discount the things that He has given other people, like to say, maybe she looks like she has a great marriage, but it's probably not that great of a marriage. So I think it makes a lot more sense for us to start looking to God and saying, Lord, what is it that you've given me? What is it that you are expecting me to do with the gifts that you've given me? And then I just find that happiness is really the greatest antidote to envy.
How else do you self-talk, your self-talk to get yourself back on track instead of being sidetracked by envy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to call it what it is, to confess it as sin, and instead of, because part of the problem is that the envious person usually hides it pretty successfully, or at least they think that they're hiding it pretty successfully, even from themselves. So, learning to see it as soon as it crops up and confess it to God, I think is really helpful, because you begin to sort of see your thoughts more clearly and for what they are, so that you're not able to fool yourself for a long period of time about the nature of your feelings. But then I I think it's important to start practicing love on the people. The very people that you envy are those that you can practice loving. You can practice by looking at the glory that they have that is bothering you so much, gazing at it, not turning your head away the way you'd like to, praising them openly. I think that's it's such a great way of like getting yourself on their team. And it's very hard to enthusiastically praise somebody and also feel envious toward them at the same time. I mean, it's been done. I've experienced it before where I knew someone was praising me and yet they were doing it in such a way that I thought, I'm glad you're working to fight this, but I could tell, that it was hard for you to get that out. You know what I mean? But it's a great starting place to begin to naturally praise something that is praiseworthy. And then, praying for the person, praying for them in the ways that you would pray for yourself, which means not just praying that God would like protect them from pride, sort of spiritualizing the whole thing, but praying for their success, praying that they would continue to get better at the thing that bothers you so much, that their marriage, if it's their marriage, that they would, their marriage would be blessed. If it's their, if it's their body, their beauty, that the Lord would keep them healthy, that they would be, there are ways of praying for others that are similar to the way we pray for ourselves and that we want the best for ourselves.
So, Tilly, tell me what was your writing process? When did you get a time to write? Because I know you're a busy mom of 2 girls.
Yes.
And you have a great husband, and I'm sure he helped. But what was your pattern of, when did you have time to write?
Well, I actually wrote the majority of the book before my first daughter was born. So this book I started it way back when I first did the sort of diagnosing, which was like 2013. I wrote probably 30 or 40% of the book then. Tried to get it published, didn't know how. And at that time, I was also the editor of a newspaper, and then later on the editor of a magazine. So I was a busy working person at that time. But I did a lot of my writing just, in the evenings and in the mornings. And I set it aside when I couldn't figure out the publishing situation. I set it down, and also because I had sort of sorted through my own personal relationship. That my sisters and I had been more or less restored at that time, or at least the process had begun. So the pressure was sort of off on the subject, and I put it aside because I just didn't feel that same pressure. Because the writing really was a part of me trying to address my envy. So several years passed. I tried again to get it published. My first daughter was born, and I started getting up at 4 a.m. for a few months to finish the book because I just felt strongly that I wanted to finish it. Finished it, sat on it for another year or two, and then last year I got an agent, and that is very quick. Within a month or so, he had gotten the publishing deal for me. So I didn't understand, I don't think, at the beginning that the agent was going to be an important part of publishing. So,
wow. Yeah. How would you recommend people go about finding an agent? How did you just found him?
Yeah, I found him, actually, I found my agent in a list of Christian nonfiction agents online. It was a short list, and he was the one at the top of the list. So he was the first person I emailed. The other thing is my proposal. I'm sure you know about proposals, but you can find information and outlines for proposals online. It's very, very much the most important document for getting your publishing deal. So the better and more polished your proposal can get, that's your document. That's your ticket into their to have them actually read your work.
Are you a reader?
I am a reader. Me and my husband are pretty voracious readers. I've been reading. I just reread Of Mice and Men, because I don't know why, because I was in the mood to read it. And I've been reading in the book of Ecclesiastes lately because I was in a strange mood to read Ecclesiastes. I think a lot of my reading is kind of driven by mood. So yeah, that's what I'm into right now.
Well, what are your 3 favorite things that you're loving these days?
Okay. So it's probably all going to be food stuff because I'm pregnant. So
I love food stuff. Yep.
Yeah. I drink Yorkshire tea. This is a British black tea that I have to order from overseas, and I have been drinking it every day for years. I think it was a British lady in my church that got us. Everybody in the church is turned on to it now. But
is that does it really taste that much different than regular tea?
I just know that when I order like an English breakfast somewhere, it doesn't taste the same to me. And I bet that an actual, a person with a more fine-tuned palate could tell me why, or could know more about that. I just know that Yorkshire is in my taste buds now. So it's the standard of tea now. But and then I've been making this soup and craving it all the time. That's like a chowder, but I make it with almond milk and coconut milk out of the can.
Oh, I need that recipe.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
I know you don't know this, but Adrian and Michael have turned vegan on me.
Oh, snap.
And
my goodness.
Very depressing.
Just like my
for
mom.
Me. It's very depressing for me because I can't cook anything for them. Yeah, they both are vegan. So I definitely need that chowder recipe.
Yeah. So it's almond milk, coconut milk. I use shrimp in mine, but you could probably just omit or something, although it's the best part. But
really good.
And then like corn and potatoes and tomatoes, and it's just it kills me every time. I'll probably eat it for lunch here in a few minutes.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, and then I've been making a salad that I call Pickle Salad. And
does it have pickles?
It does not have pickles. It's just it's like butter lettuce, so it's getting expensive because I can't afford to keep buying as much butter lettuce as I would like to eat. But it's just lettuce and a huge amount of lemon juice and a little olive oil and a whole bunch of salt. So it's like the sort of vinegary, and sometimes vinegar in there too, but it's so much vinegary lemon juice that basically the lettuce is just being pickled in the bowl.
Wow. That sounds delicious.
It is so good. It is all that I want to eat. So besides the chowder. But
Tilly, thank you so much for coming on. I am thrilled that you are finding success with this book, and that that you're reaching other women and men who are struggling with this. And I'm glad that God has entrusted you with this message, because I feel like it's going to be a good thing for a lot of people to work through.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on.
Okay. Thank you.
I am so glad Tilly wrote this book. I think we can all benefit from reading this book and doing a check-in with ourselves on the topic of envy. I also think this book would be a great addition to your next book club or Bible study. It's just always good to check in with our emotions and things that might be ruining our relationships, and getting together with a group of women or some people that you feel comfortable with, a safe group, and just unpacking some of the things that might be hidden behind some of the destructive behaviors that are going on. I think it would be a wonderful thing to give space to talk about this subject, and it can help us live our lives free from the destruction of envy. Head over to the show notes at CorrineSandiford.com to read more about Tilly and how to get this book. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss an episode. Again, next week I'll have Friday Favorites, and Rising Stories is also on Spotify and YouTube, Stitcher for your Android users, and music is by Ben Sound. Thanks so much for listening, and keep rising in your story.